All right, let's wait for some people to get in.
Okay.
I know that it says somewhere it's been a little bit since we've used this. It says we currently have 0 people watching. Good start. We'll give it a second. I still have 0 people. We need one person to show up before we get there. Oh, we got one person. Okay. 6 people. All right, we're rolling. Welcome to the Chasing Perfection UConn women's basketball pregame show. We are here to chat UConn, Oregon, half an hour to tip off. And it is a very different discussion than we were planning on having for most of the day. Just about 50 minutes ago, UConn announced that Kristen Williams is out for this game due to COVID protocols. Nobody else on the team, no players, no staff are affected. But that still leaves UConn without one of their best players over the last 2 games. It also leaves UConn with essentially 2+ guards. We don't really know what Nika Mule's minutes restriction might be, but at the very least, there's Caroline Ducharme, there's Avina Westbrook, and there's however many minutes Nika Mule can provide. It's a very different situation than UConn faced earlier in the season when they only had 3 guards, because instead of it being Nika Mule, it was Kristen Williams who was that 3rd guard, and she could at least play all 40 minutes if necessary. There's probably going to be a lot of this game where UConn has to play with 2 guards on the floor and 3 bigs, which is not exactly a lineup that UConn thrives in, but it's what they got to do right now.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to have to make it work. It's unfortunate, but it is what it is. This team just obviously cannot catch a break at all over the last month. I guess it's been now. I don't even know. But yeah, can't catch a break without Kristen Williams. I think it's especially disappointing considering how good Kristen Williams has been over the last couple of games that we don't get to see if she can kind of sustain that against a team like Oregon. But yeah, it's going to have to be a big game from Avina Westbrook. I think it's her homecoming, so hopefully she can kind of step up and help out in the backcourt. But like you said, 2.5 guards basically, so it's going to be interesting for sure.
Yeah, I was thinking through it, and I don't exactly have a ton of confidence in that guard group just because, yeah, it's Avina's homecoming. Hopefully she can turn it around, but she really hasn't played all that well in her last 4 games generally. She's had good moments some of the last 2 games, but it's been a bit of a grind for her. Even just on Saturday, it looked like something was off with her, not necessarily physically, but you could tell that the struggles kind of worn on her, and it's been frustrating, understandably, for a 5th-year player to be going through a stretch like this. And then Caroline Ducharme has been fantastic pretty much ever since Paige Beckers went down. But at a certain point, is that going to – it almost feels like, is this just one long mirage with Caroline Ducharme? I don't really believe that it is. But is she able to sustain these 17, 18, 19, 20-point games every single game? She didn't have a great shooting night against Xavier, but still put up a lot of points. That's just a lot of pressure to be putting on a freshman, a lot of pressure to be necessitated on a freshman. They have no other options. They physically do not have any other guards besides her. And then Nika Mule's been great for this team since she got back, but she's not a scorer. She's on minutes limits. We don't know how much she's going to be able to play. Can she find the basket a little bit more today? It's not exactly, I think, the 3 guards right now that you would want out there. Yeah, maybe you do want Ducharme out there, but it's what UConn has, again, and it's what they're going to have to figure it out with.
Yeah, and I think the focus is going to have to be on the front court stepping up tonight. They're going to have big games, and that's going to be a tall task. This isn't like a small Oregon team. You've got Naira Savely and Sedona Prince in the post, especially when they have those 2 on the floor together. That's a tough battle inside. So Olivia Nelson-Ododa, Dorka Uhas, and Olivia Edwards are going to have to really step it up tonight. I think we're probably going to see the 3 of them on the floor tonight at some point, probably maybe a lot of the game. So that should be interesting to kind of see how that looks. Especially with, honestly, it could give them a little bit more advantage inside, given that Oregon already has those 2 post players. Can you go big, especially when one of those players is on the bench and really dominate in the paint? That might be a way that you can kind of get some early or easy points in this one. But the front court, I think, is going to have to be the focus because the back court is just going to be thinner than we've seen it this season, which is really saying something at this point.
Right, and not to overlook those 3 players because every single one of them is going to have a good game tonight. But I think a quiet, sneaky, important player could be Amari DeBerry, just because, again, we don't know how much Nika Mule is going to be able to play. And the reason she started again was that Gino wanted to get all of those minutes up front in the game. And basically, she wouldn't play as much in the second half. But if she's rolling as your third guard, let's pretend she came back a week ago and was at 15 minutes. What did she play against Xavier? It still wasn't very much. It's not
Yeah.
like she's really progressed that dramatically. So even if she's on a 20-minute time restriction, you're going to want her on the floor at the end of the game. But that means you're going to have to sacrifice minutes earlier in the game. So even if you save 7 minutes for the fourth quarter to play her, that still only means you're limited to 13 minutes the first three quarters. So do you use 7 of those in the first quarter to get off on a good start, and then play her 3 minutes the next two quarters, and then close out with 7? Again, assuming that's even what the restriction is. That's going to be really tough. So I think UConn isn't going to have a ton of depth for most of this game, just because it's going to be those three bigs and the two guards on the court for a lot of it. If Amari DeBerry can come in and just hold her own, she doesn't even really need to do anything. She just has to not hurt the team out there. It's a very low bar. It's one that she's more than capable of reaching. It's one that we've seen her reach this year. If she can just do that to give those three bigs a breather throughout the game, I think that could be a really important role for this team.
Yeah, I think that's going to be really critical. Her, or honestly, it could be P.F. Gabriel too. We did see her first against Xavier, so you never know what's going to happen there. But both of them had good games in that fourth quarter against Xavier, so hopefully they can build on that. And if they have to come in today, just use that as a bit of a confidence boost to play some good minutes out there when UConn needs them. And then I think the other critical thing is just UConn's bigs can't get into foul trouble, because if someone gets into foul trouble, this is going to get, I think, pretty ugly pretty quickly.
Right. Well, with PF Gabriel, my concern is more just, yeah, she was really good on the offensive end, but sometimes on the defensive end, it looks like she's never been on the basketball court.
Right.
She's not great with her positioning. She's a little awkward with her movements on that end of the floor. She, despite her size, she doesn't seem to be that strong of a rebounder. So I think Amari DeBerry is definitely further along in that regard. Maybe PF, if you really get into foul trouble, they'll have to play her, and she could come up with a big performance like she did the other night. But I think it might be a bit of a risk to rely on her. I did pull up the stats from the Xavier game. Nika played 24 minutes, so I think it's safe to assume that her minutes restriction is probably still 25 minutes, just because they've had one game in between, or one day in between Saturday and now. So 25 minutes. I think you probably try and block off the entire fourth quarter to be able to play her, because that's going to be a really important time. And I feel like you got to start her. And if things start going well, then maybe you put her on the bench and just see how long you can survive for stretches without her throughout those first three quarters, and just put her in when you need a spark, when you need something, this or that. And then you can start to build those minutes up as you go into the fourth quarter, because if you get to the end of this game, you need Nika Mule on the floor. You need your point guard. You need just her defensive presence, her communication, all of that. So it's going to be a really tricky way for Gino to have to balance these minutes with her, especially with how short they are literally everywhere else in the lineup.
Yeah, exactly. But I agree with you. I think it has to be, you have to reserve that fourth quarter for her, especially because we've seen, I think that UConn's offense has looked so much better with her on the floor. And we've seen how much this team can struggle scoring points in the fourth quarter. If they're in a position where they're in this game in the fourth and they just need to kind of go out and do what they need to do in the fourth quarter, I think you want to have Nika Mule on the floor to help the offense look better. So hopefully you can kind of, break that streak that we've seen from them this year so far, where the fourth quarter they kind of fall apart offensively. If they can just pull it together in the fourth quarter with her on the floor, that's going to be huge.
UConn just announced the starters as we're speaking. No big surprise. Avina Westbrook back into the starting lineup for Kristen Williams. The rest is the same. Nika at point guard, Caroline Ducharme at the other guard position, and then in the front court, it's Dorky Uhas and Olivia Nelson-Adota. No real surprises there.
Yeah, I think probably what we would expect to see. You're going to start with that lineup, and then we'll probably rotate into that point guard position as Nika has to come up off the floor.
Right. I think we've also seen a little bit, not a ton, but they have used Olivia Nelson-Adota, not necessarily as a point guard or a point forward, but she has handled a very small fraction of ball handling duties. I'm curious if maybe they don't increase that today, but they just try and use it a little more to their advantage. If maybe she can even just get the ball to the quarter spot on the court or even to half court and then give it off just to alleviate the ball handlers a little bit. I think you really just got to be creative with your lineups, with your offensive sets, with everything, with how shorthanded they're going to be. Because, yeah, 25 minutes that Nika can play, assuming that's what the minutes restriction is, that still means it's, I'm good at math, 15 minutes that you're not going to have her on the court. You're only going to have two guards. And it's not even like you have a walk-on like Adam Chasson, who you can throw out there for 5 minutes or something just to help out. You really have not even really, you literally do not have anyone behind those two. So just a very, very tough situation for UConn to be in.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised to see them use Liv a little bit more in that facilitator role again in this game, especially because we've seen that Avina just plays so much better when she's more off the ball, not forced into that point guard position. That's just not natural for her. So if they can even just use Liv at that spot a little bit, it'll help kind of open up Avina to hopefully knock down some shots and be able to contribute, because they're going to need everyone to contribute today.
I think the other tough part about losing Kristen is I can't imagine you're going to want to get out and transition a whole lot because you need to save your energy. You can't have your guards running up and down the floor the whole game. That is just not sustainable by any means. And also, something I don't think we mentioned is the guards can't get into foul trouble. There are no chance the guards can get into foul trouble. Otherwise, UConn will absolutely imagine if Ducharme and Avina both pick up 2 fouls in the first quarter. We're going to literally see Olivia Nelson-Ododa running the point. So I think those two probably are going to have to sacrifice some things on both ends of the floor because, what was it, 3 offensive fouls that Caroline got against Xavier? That can't happen. You can't be getting those type of fouls. If the defender's there, you just got to accept it. You got to move on, and you got to keep going, find another play. Defensively, if it's 50-50, I think you just got to let them get the basket because as much as those points hurt, not having those players on the floor would be even worse because if suddenly UConn can only play one of their guards, what reason does Oregon have not to draw out a full court press and make UConn's bigs attempt to get the ball up the floor? That would quickly turn into a disaster. So UConn's guards have to be really, really smart. UConn's going to have to be really creative. This is a really tall task for the Huskies tonight. And the behind the scenes video, if you watch that from SNY, I think it was a couple weeks ago, or they put it out last week. It was definitely a much older clip where no one had returned to the court yet of the injured bunch. He said how no one expects them to win anymore. Every single big game they play, they're going to be underdogs. I feel like that's doubly true tonight. I don't think there's any reasonable way that you can expect UConn to win tonight. And if they do, I think I don't think it's being hyperbolic by saying this would legitimately be one of Gino Auriemma's best coaching jobs in an individual game because throw out Oregon's record, throw out where they are in the poll or their lack of being in the poll. They're a top 25 team. They're a good team. They're finally fully healthy. This was going to be a tough game regardless of if everyone had UConn they expected to be available.
Yeah, exactly. They just knocked off number 7 or Arizona. I don't actually think Arizona is a top 10 team, but regardless, at full health, this Oregon team is good. They could probably easily be a top 15 team if we had seen this team, at full health all season long. So I think it's a tough task regardless. Even if they had Kristen Williams, this was going to be a tough game. Oregon is a really, really solid team. Now without Kristen Williams, it's a tough game. So if they could pull out a win today, I think that's going to say a ton about where this team is at. If they could pull that off, this team is in a really good spot. If they don't, if they stay competitive in this game, I still don't think there's any reason to hit a panic button. I think things are still trending in the right direction. It's going to be seeing what this team can do against this team today and just, learning from what we see on the court, not necessarily what the final score is.
Yeah, I think Gino probably said it best after the Xavier game is, if they win, that's great. And if they lose, well, it depends how they lose. If they come out and they show no energy and they already have accepted defeat without Kristen Williams, then yeah, that's a really bad sign. But if they lose on a corner buzzer beater 3 where it was back and forth the whole game, then you shrug your shoulders and you go, okay, well, you put up a pretty good effort against a really good team despite being very shorthanded. I think that's a pretty good sign. So it all depends how it goes. I just think it's a lot to expect just with how the roster unfolds. If they didn't have one of their bigs, pick any of them, and they only had two bigs for this entire game, that's so different. But because you can naturally play with five guards in the lineup. Maybe it's not a great lineup to have. Maybe you might get hurt a little bit in the post, but you can still figure out ways to play with
Right.
five guards. You cannot play with five bigs on the floor, especially the five bigs that UConn has. It's not like we're talking about Nafisa Collier and Gabby Williams. Nafisa, who was pretty good with the ball in her hands, and Gabby, who was a former guard. It's it's a very short-handed team. It's a consistent, not consistent. It's just a very tough spot for UConn to be in. So I think it's just a lot to ask of them to try and get this upset, especially on the road. If it was home, I think it would be a little different. But just the way the roster is constructed, it'll be tough.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, they're going into a venue on the road that is hard to play in to begin with. Oregon's a great program. They've had a lot of success. That arena is going to be packed. So it's going to be a tough environment on the road. Then you've got the roster situation as it is. So, I mean, hopefully people will step up. That's what we've been seeing over the last few games. So I think there's obviously a chance for UConn to hold their own and come out with a win out of this game. But they're going to really need everything to go right, I think, for that to happen.
Yeah. All right. We're closing in on tip. We're just under 10 minutes. Let's get a prediction, not just what the final score will be, but how do you think this game progresses and looks, and how does it end up with the final score that you predict?
I'm going to go on the optimistic side and say that we're going to see a really big game from Avina. It's her homecoming. We know that she can do it. We saw it against UCLA. She can put this team on her back. I think she steps up because it's her homecoming. She's the senior guard on the floor now. Kristen's not there to carry this team. So I think we see a big game from her, and it's going to be a close one. I don't really know how it's going to end, but I say it ends within 5 points one way or the other.
Okay. I can't just say what I said and then pick UConn to win. I think UConn probably loses, but I think they do so in a pretty respectable fashion. I can see them playing really well, having a really gutsy performance, and then it just gets to the end, and I think if this team kind of falls apart in the last 5 minutes because you can visibly see they're tired, I don't think it's really anything you can blame them for. So I think they fight hard. I think they play well and ultimately come up within single digits. I don't know if it'll be as close as 5 points, but it'll definitely come down to the last few minutes of the fourth quarter where UConn's in range but can't quite close it, or maybe Oregon pulls away just a little bit at the end. But I still think UConn can have a really good performance today, feel good about the way they played, and have something to build on, even if they don't come away with the win.
Agreed. I think regardless if it's a competitive game, they can come out with a good feeling about this one, given where they're at.
Right. Again, depending how it goes. It can
Yes.
all change depending on that. So that'll do it for the Chasing Perfection pregame show. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. You can watch this again on the Store Central YouTube page. Other than that, be sure to follow along with us throughout the game, and thanks for watching.